Welcome to Alex's Asylum. We have a very special guest today, the OG of fitness Twitter, Mr. Alexander Cortes. Alexander, welcome to the show.
What's up, Alex?
Well, why don't you tell everybody who may not know you? I doubt that many people who are listening in know me, but not you. But let's pretend that folks are familiar with Alex Feinberg, but not Alexander Cortes. You want to give a background of how you became the OG of fitness Twitter. From the days of, I think you were hammering like 5 or 10 energy drinks a day, working in a commercial gym, to where now you can live on your own, working for yourself, in the proper manner that the founder of Chatistan should be living. How did you get to the point where you are today?
All right, so we'll do a recap. Let's pretend nobody knows who I am. So, name's Alexander Juan Antonio Cortes. I go by Ajax on Twitter. That's become sort of my name that I'm known by, my handle. I've been a personal trainer since 2010. So I'm 33 now. I started working in gyms in 2009. So the gym job is the only job I've ever officially done. Like, I have not done anything else but personal training. And, a lot of other skill sets have been folded into that, but personal training is my thing. Fitness is my thing. I started working online, or I should say writing online, in 2013. So this is before fitness influencer sphere concept even sort of had taken root. Started writing online in 2013. Also started writing for magazines, fitness magazines in 2013. Things like Iron Man, muscle magazines, things like that. I decided around 2015 to start using Twitter, just because I found the platform interesting. You can write, obviously. It was 140 characters then, and it was super fast. And writing has always been easy for me. I can write, it doesn't require much effort. My brain works well that way. Very literary. So I started using Twitter in 2015, kept tweeting 2015, 16. 2017, I decided to go all in on my own business, working for myself. I had worked for other people in the past. I wrote for Relief TS, which is very well-known education company and like sort of strength and conditioning sphere. I worked for John Meadows, who was a very well-known bodybuilder, although he passed away last year. God rest his soul. So I realized around 2017 that being a fitness influencer, personality, celebrity, something, whatever you want to call it, that it'd become a prominent enough position where you could create a livelihood out of having highly curated knowledge, packaging it to people, giving it to them in solutionary kind of setups. So 2017, I did that. And that was after working my sort of final year in a gym, doing 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. days. Didn't want to do that anymore. Realized there was no future. Obviously working hourly, like I maxed out, was burned out. And then since then it's taken off. And then Twitter in the last few years, probably since Trump got elected, has become this sort of social phenomenon where you're tapped into the world's mega consciousness at any given time. You can accrue a following, you can reach millions of people, you can create a business, you can network, you can build relationships. And since I started on Twitter at the time, 2015, 16, I'm pretty sure I was the only guy tweeting about fitness, honestly, like literally the only one on the platform. Like there was no one else. As odd as that sounds now, like there was no one else. Yeah, it was considered a really weird thing 5 or 6 years ago to even be using Twitter purposefully. Like it was considered a waste of time. I remember the commentary then of people asking like, why would you even bother tweeting? Why do you have a newsletter? Like, why do you think this is even worthwhile? Yeah, and today there's Twitter guides. There's every company now that's any company wants Twitter presence. It's become very important. 5 or 6 years ago, that was not the case. So I was ahead of the curve in that way.
Did you think that what has manifested now was possible when you were getting started? Or was it more like, hey, I'm good at this, it's not that hard? It's sort of like, if you have some pet project that costs $30 a month to keep alive, you're like, well, why not? Like, why don't I do that?
I thought it would turn into something for the reason being that from 2007, let's say, not even before that, from high school, like in the early 2000s, to when I graduated in 2007, and I saw how Facebook was becoming this sort of like monolithic platform that everybody had to be on. Now it's not so much anymore. Like Facebook is now uncool.
Yeah.
15 years ago, it was the cool platform, because young people were on it. So I saw how social media was taking over people's lives, honestly. Like this is a cliched thing to say now, but 10 years ago, it was still, is it really going to dominate how it dominates? Yeah, it did. So when I started using Twitter, the reason why I favored it was because I had this idea that specialized platforms would become more preferred as time went on. So you had Facebook, which was kind of everything at once. It had, you could write, you could post videos, you could do pictures. It was your own network of people. And then you had YouTube, which was just videos. You had Instagram, which was just pictures. And Twitter I liked because Twitter was only writing at the time. And people that like to write are people that like to read. People like to read are intelligent people. Mm-hmm. So my assumption is that the average Twitter user is of higher IQ than, say, the average Instagram user or the average Facebook user, because it's only reading. Stupid people don't read, period.
Right.
Yeah, they don't.
I don't read either, but call me stupid if you want.
Well, I mean, you can read.
Recently, this is a recent occurrence. I could not read that well when I was in high school.
You know what I mean, though, in the sense that people that acquire information through reading, whether it's reading books or just reading something, like that requires a high level of intellect. So I saw Twitter. I'm like, I think this is going to turn into something. And because it was so fast, it still is to this day. It's just this rapid fire feed, right? So, and our human brains are oriented naturally towards these sort of information networks where we get fed information very quickly. Mm-hmm. So everybody that has ADHD or ADD even a little bit, like Twitter is amazing. It just it hits all your addiction points. So I thought it was a good investment. And then, like I said, having worked for other people in the fitness industry, like I saw John's rise to prominence over a few years. Yeah, I realized that winning the online game, becoming successful at it, it was just a game of content. Mm-hmm. The more you could produce, and assuming your production was of some level of quality, it was if your content was okay, it was at least okay, you would dominate. I saw people that would be flashes in the pan. They'd produce like some really good articles. This is like this 10 years ago, blogging was the thing. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing people that wrote some good articles. They're bloggers, and then they just got tired of writing. They stopped, and their fame fell away. Their influence dropped. But I saw anyone that could keep up content production, anyone that could keep up writing or video or pictures, whatever the case may be, over time they would acquire an audience, since everybody gets online to look for something. We're all looking for stimulation. We're all looking for knowledge or entertainment.
Right.
And Twitter, I think, Twitter favors my natural talents for information creation, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I can write. So I thought it would work out, and it has, obviously. And today, because so many people use Twitter and the ease of entry is quite low.
Yes.
It's designed for constant usage, unlike say Instagram, where you can't really post more than 1 or 2 pictures a day.
Sure.
You can do stories, but Twitter still has to this day probably the best algorithm where you can still find people. Anyone can get started.
Sure.
Anyone can grow. So you can overcome that inertia. And as we've seen the last 2 or 3 years or so, now people have full-on brands, which are Twitter-specific brands, and it's given them the leverage to branch out into other areas.
Right. Well, I found the same thing when I was getting started on Twitter in around 2019. First of all, I was working at a cryptocurrency exchange. Twitter is the most prominent social network for cryptocurrency. I'm in a sales role. I realized, hey, these guys are paying me a pretty hefty base salary. There's all these other people in business development and crypto who have prominent Twitter accounts. If I can't get to 10,000 followers, how employable am I going to be 3 years down the line? Oh, and by the way, I can't really stand out with my content creation around crypto because I don't know enough relative to the other people, but I happen to have stumbled across a pretty cool system of approaching fitness without killing myself in the gym and eating crappy food and counting calories. And all I need to do is document what I'm doing at work. So you can't really create YouTube videos while you're sitting at a desk job that well. You can't really create Instagram reels while you're sitting at a desk job, but you can tweet while you're sitting at a desk job. You eat lunch every day. You can take a picture of it and talk about why you're eating that food. And so I think Twitter was the only platform that enabled me to kickstart a business that, got to $10,000 a month while I had a full-time job. I don't think that any of these other platforms, unless I somehow grew exponentially to where I had 1 million subscribers or something while I had a full-time job, would have enabled me to seamlessly transition into working for myself.
I remember those days when you were, I didn't quite know where you worked, but I remember when you were tweeting your lunch and what you're eating each day. But it worked, obviously.
Right.
Twitter is interesting because you can, obviously, unlike every other platform, when you release content, when you tweet, you can always interact with everybody that replies back.
Right.
So by default, it feels more personal.
Right.
People feel like they know you, which is a good thing.
Right. Right. So one thing that's interesting to me is like your temperament. I think you're a very high IQ individual. You may not. You've debated me on this, but I think you probably have a quite high IQ. At what point did you realize that your level of intelligence was at least in the upper sliver of people? Like maybe you're not like Einstein level IQ or Elon Musk level IQ, but like you're clearly smarter than most people you'll interact with on the street. And I don't think you got good grades in school. So like how did that process go where what was your GPA in high school? Do you remember?
It was terrible.
You barely graduated?
No, I graduated. It was like 3.0. Yeah, I think I realized at some point that I was reasonably intelligent. IQ, I never cared about. Like, so it took me a long time to get into reading when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
So I was one of those kids like in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, where I refused to learn how to read. And this was like a very big deal at the time, right? I remember it was this battle for like up until the third grade where I'm like, I don't want to learn how to read, or stupid, I'm never going to read. And then, so that's how that went. And then I just found school boring. It was like a lot of boys. I just found school boring. I couldn't get into it. A lot of things. Math was boring. Most subjects. I just remember sitting around as like a child in class and you're like, fuck, man. I mean, I don't know if I was saying fuck, but like, I don't want to be here. Like, why am I here? Like, being a kid is stupid. Like, I legitimately counted down the days. Every year from the age of like 6, 7 till 18, I counted down the days until I was going to be an adult. That's the only thing I ever looked forward to. Like being a child in school and K-12 education was just fucking torturous.
But you had no idea that being an adult in your 20s would mean waking up at 5 a.m. and working till 8 p.m.
I didn't, but it was so much better than being a kid because I was going to work because I chose that job. I was not waking up because I had to, because the job was given to me. Like, having that choice, that being able to exercise free will was all the difference in happiness. But to answer the question, so like, I started finally when I was in like third grade. We got assigned to read. This is so funny. So Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, right? Mm-hmm. Like classical children's series. And I remember, so we got assigned to read these books, and I found them fascinating. I must have read those Laura Ingalls Prairie series like God knows how many times. I read the whole series, read the Rose Wilder series, but that got me to reading. Mm-hmm. And so I went from being a kid that like hated school to a kid that loved to read right around like third grade. Okay. And I just started reading everything I get my hands on. But then the critique at that point became like, we know he's smart, but he doesn't do anything. He just reads all day in class. Like he's just always with a book. Like that was the thing at that point. Like the teacher was like, Alexander, are you reading? I'm like, no. I always had a book. So, and that's all I ever did in middle school and high school. I just read. And then most subjects, I just always found everything easy. Yeah. Like I wasn't necessarily good at everything talent wise. Like, math took time to learn, but like nothing was hard.
Yeah. 30 minutes.
I could not relate to the experience of something being like cognitively challenging where you'd watch other kids be like, you realize like they can't figure it out. Like they just don't have the cognitive power for this to make any form of sense to them. Right. Like, their sense making capacity is not there. So I realized I'm like, that's definitely not me. And then I saw people who were more intelligent than myself. And then, as a kid, you like convince yourself you're smarter than them because like, okay, well, this girl's really good at writing, but she thinks good grades are important and they're not because no one's paying me to be here. And that was always my argument with teachers. I'm like, I'm not getting paid to be here. So why am I working hard at this? Like why? This is no one's going to give a shit about this in 10 years. Nobody has. Like I feel, today I feel very validated. Like I completely disregarded any form of academic achievement. And did it matter? No, it didn't.
I'm sure your parents they weren't certain that outcome was going to happen.
No, but my parents, they always, I had very encouraging parents. They told me, they loved me. They thought I was smart. Like, just, you need to apply yourself to something. And then so at high school comes, I'm very determined so I was always in like the advanced classes, AP classes. I slacked off on all those, but I was in those classes. I always found a lot of high IQ people to be somewhat annoying. So there's always this love of intellect that people have, and like that middle bracket of intelligence where like you're above average, but you're not genius, but you think like you're just incredibly fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Because you have this ability to be very verbose and articulate.
You're smart enough to masquerade as an intelligent person, but you don't realize that there's a difference between masquerading as intelligent and being intelligent.
Being intelligent, yeah, and especially with school, like especially the consumption of literature, or just having class projects, or doing assigned work, or getting good grades. It presents itself as somebody that's incredibly capable, of great intellectual standing, and I saw a lot of those kids. Some succeeded, some did not. IQ is predictive to a point. It's not absolute.
Sure.
So, but that was high school, and then so in high school, I didn't want to go to college either. I thought college was going to be a fucking waste of time. And college, in my mind, was just a continuation of school. I was like, this is not what I want to do. What I wanted to do out of high school is I wanted to go to Asia and do martial arts. And my parents,
I didn't realize you fulfilled a lifelong.
So
dream.
That's a dream. And my parents said, like, no, you're not doing that. Like, it's not a career, right? You need a job. This is the 1990s. How are you ever going to make money if you don't go to college? So I agreed that I'd go to college to get a dance degree, which is functionally worthless.
So you knew this before you went to school? Like, I'm going to major in dance.
Yeah. Yeah, since I wanted to choose the most non-academic thing possible that required no academic work, nothing, not a zip.
Because you wanted it to be easy, or you wanted to eliminate the possibility that you would use your degree after you graduated?
I wanted to, I changed my career goal. I was like, okay, if I can't go to Asia, I'm not going to be able to do martial arts like I want to. Like, dancing sounded really cool. I liked dancing. It was artistic. It's a very different way to express yourself, obviously. Okay, so I decided, like, I'm going to be a professional ballet dancer. That's what I'll do. I have an artistic personality in certain regards, although I don't necessarily show that now so much online. So I decided that would be the thing. And like I said, I knew I had to go to college. My parents were just very much about that. In retrospect, I should have probably gone to like a dance conservatory and gone that route. But that's not what happened. Oh well. So I went to college for a dance performance and choreography degree. I got injured really badly my first semester training. So I tore my left hamstring mostly off.
How?
So I landed in the splits, and then the hamstring snapped. And your hamstring attaches at 3 tendinous attachments to the ischial tuberosity. So I tore off like 2 of them.
Because you didn't have the mobility to perform the move that you were doing?
I did have the flexibility, but it was morning. And so it was like, this is like a morning class. I was just dehydrated. So this is kind of my first inkling that I can't assign a true percentage to this. This is purely estimation, but I would say probably maybe like half of all muscle tears that guys experience in the gym are a result of dehydration or not being fully hydrated. So I remember at the time I woke up really early. I went to this class. It was at an outside studio. I remember going there, like I had like dry mouth. I was tired. I was tired. Like I remember like being on the car on the way there. I'm like, damn, I'm thirsty right now. Like, oh shit, I have no water. I'm like, oh, whatever. I got to take this class. And then I landed in the splits at the very end of class and then snapped, like made a noise, a very distinct audible sound. And after that, like I wasn't able to really dance anymore because my left leg didn't work at all. And, but that was like really the first semester of college. So the rest of the college experience is just sort of this bitter, gray haze of disappointment and wishing I could drop out, but parents didn't want me to drop out. They were insistent in the degree. I had to get it. So I finally did get it. It only took 3 years because I had AP credits. But then at that point, I realized this was like 2008, 2009, Great Recession, post-economic crash. And I had all these red pill moments living in San Francisco, seeing this crash unfold where like, okay, liberal run cities are, I want to use the term shithole. San Francisco was still nice at the time, but I realized that cities that are run purely by democratic political machines have a lot of problems, let's just say.
And so you graduated in 2011, right?
2010.
And could you have foreseen San Francisco becoming the shithole that it is right now in 2010?
Yes. Because what I saw then was that the city was very beautiful. Like it has still had a bit of like that San Francisco magical city allure, as many cities do. It did. But there was like I had my car broken into when I was living there. more than once. I saw other cars get broken into. I saw like petty crime happening. Like there was a growing homeless population that I kind of noticed. It creeped up over like the 3 years I was there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've always been very environmentally aware. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those people that's in their own world that just ignores everything.
Right.
So I saw these little small changes where it seemed that on the street level, the city operations were becoming less and less competent over time, mm-hmm. or they were becoming more lax over time. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to keep living there, of course. I was very dissatisfied living there. And also, women in San Francisco are fucking ugly. All the jokes about like a San Francisco 4 thinking she's a 9, they're all true.
Right.
It's all true. So
and it's the men's fault. It's the men who tolerate it that enable it.
You know what? It's a geeky city. The tech industry transformed San Francisco into this nerd metropolis, and it's god awful. Now it's very dystopian if you go there today, as many people found out. But so this is so I finally graduate. I'm pissed off the whole college experience. I've been red pill living there, politically, seeing sort of the gay neighborhoods and the degeneracy there, which foretold a lot of things that happened decades later, over a decade now later. Seeing my parents had to foreclose their house and realizing my parents really didn't know anything about money. Also having this realization that I was getting this worthless liberal arts degree and I knew nothing about how to make money. I had no real job skills. So I was coming close to graduation, sort of a year away. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, and I know I'm smart, but I've clearly wasted my intellect at this point on this stupid degree. I'm like, this was a bad decision on multiple levels now. What do I do?
Did you blame your parents
No.
So you're 21 years old. You didn't want to go to college. You only went because your parents really wanted you to. You didn't think, fuck.
They didn't know. They didn't know.
Okay.
I realized, because of a lot of things today, because of Twitter, because of various influences, there has been this collective awakening among a certain percentage of the population that the world is not what it seems. Mm-hmm. That was not the case 12, 15, 17 years ago.
That's correct.
It wasn't.
Right.
You would have been called a crazy person, absolute conspiracy theorist.
Right.
When you have this, now we have this collective community online where it's people where they're health red pilled and they're financially red pilled, mm-hmm. and they want to be autonomous. They want to be a sovereign individual. They know that the system is rigged against them. They're living in the matrix. So all these phrases we throw around now, all these concepts, and if you're part of this community, it's part of the common tongue, right? Mm-hmm. We all know what we're referring to. That didn't exist in 2007, 2008.
Oh, right.
The Great Recession, that whole economic crash, that was a huge shock. And I remember at the time questioning it, since it was such a big event, especially in my hometown. So where I grew up in Riverside County, about 1 in 4, 1 in 3 people lost their homes.
Wow.
Whole neighborhoods were just foreclosed signs. It was bad. But I remember at the time, I'm like, sort of when I was going back home, see my parents, going back to school, I'm like, how did no one know this was going to happen? There were no predictions. There were no signs. There was no foresight that things were wrong in the economy, whatever that meant at the time. Sure. I really didn't understand economics. Nobody knew anything. It just crashed for no reason. Nothing happens without causation. I've always been of the belief that all things are cause and effect. So then this started this whole investigation into economics and the Federal Reserve and how the banking system works, which can get very multi-layered, obviously very fast. So I started my own financial self-education at that point. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I'll credit that book to being very formative. Mm-hmm. But Robert Kiyosaki gets shit on a lot, today. Maybe for good reasons. Maybe he's full shit at times. But if you're someone where you grew up with a very blue-collar, 20th century traditionalist view of money, mm-hmm. and your idea of being rich was that someone paid you a lot per hour and gave you a paycheck, and that's all you knew, that book is a huge paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. It was for me. Mm-hmm. So I started my own financial education. So I'm coming into college and I don't know what to do. I have no job skills. This is a really weird economy to start working in. What's something I can get paid above minimum wage for and survive? I liked working out. I had been in the gym trying to rehab my hamstring for 2 years at that point, trying to get my body back. I'd been a gym goer since probably middle of high school. Started lifting weights to get girls. Very generic kind of story. I was like, personal training looks fun. It pays more minimum wage. Starting hourly for a personal trainer was $15, $17 an hour in 2009, 2010. So I decided that I would do that. I'll become a personal trainer, and we'll see what happens. Like, it's something. So I got certified, started personal training in 2010, the year I graduated, and then I kept doing it. I kept going, and I wanted to quit basically every single year, because about a year into it, I realized like this too was an hourly job with no real future.
Sure.
At the time, but I was good at it. I liked teaching. The body has always been something that has fascinated me. I like the philosophy behind it, sort of this blending of this interdisciplinary blend of philosophy of biology, philosophy of fitness, philosophy of applied practice. I enjoy those kinds of physical I enjoy any kind of task where you get to apply both intellectual power and hard kinetic application, and then you get some kind of result. So you get to think about it, you get to do it. Like, I love that. And obviously you're not sitting at a desk, right? So I just kept doing it. And like I said, I wanted to quit personal training literally every single year I was working at it. But once I did it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, at the 5-year point, I'm like, I know I'm really good at this. Like, I'm fantastic at it. Like, why would I stop? But I knew that I had to turn into something that was going to create wealth, and give me some leverage, beyond just getting paid by my employer, which took some time to figure out. But it worked out.
Were you able, like, because you're probably only making like what, $50K or something your last couple of years as a personal trainer?
My last year of personal training, so I keep the details scant because I don't like to speak ill of people. But I was working at a gym. I had agreed to basically be extremely underpaid in exchange for like equity later on, which this is a stupid,
because you tried to apply the rich dad poor dad concept on a zero margin business.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, in retrospect, or like when I see guys today who are like in their early 20s on Twitter, they're making money, like they're way smarter than I am. Like, I was incredibly naive with my, whatever you want to call it, my business approach to how I was going to become wealthy working for this gym. But basically, I agreed to be extremely underpaid. I only got paid $20K in 2016. Like, on paper. It was like this poverty wages. And then they were going to offer me supposedly equity after like so many months. And then the equity that they offered was 1% a year for 25 years. That was the offer. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the time, like I laugh about it now, but I remember, so I went and had a conversation, like, I need to make more money. Like, what are you guys going to offer me? Like, give me some incentive. Like, okay, we'll give you 1% of the business. Like, if you keep working here, we'll give you 1% of the business a year for the next 25 years until you own a quarter of it.
Yeah.
Like, and I knew how much they were making. I knew what the actual monthly gross was, all this shit. I was like, okay, I'm going to go think about that. Thanks, guys. And I walked out. I'm like, I'm going to get 1% of a gym for 25 years. So I'll be 50 and I'll own a quarter of a business. And I started laughing. I knew that day, like, I'm quitting this fucking shit. Like, how that guy thought that was a good deal, like, I don't know. But like, look at me. I'm a dumb fuck for even working here and thinking that I was going to get something out of it that was actually substantial. So anyway, so I quit. And at that point, it's like, okay, it's time to go all in your own thing. This was like the end of 2016. I'm like, 2017 that'll like mark the beginning of our main character era, as like the Zoomers call it now.
Mm-hmm. So, like, how did you live? Because it's not like you had a ton of savings from your non-highly lucrative 2015 and 2014 days.
I had fucking nothing. I had like $5K in credit card debt when I left, and some student loans, which I had put in forbearance a gazillion times over. No, I mean, like, I'm not gonna say I was living in absolute poverty, but like, I would shop at Sam's Club once a week. My meals were like, so I'd buy like eggs in bulk. I bought chicken in bulk. I bought rice in bulk.
But you're also living in San Francisco. Like,
no. I was living in Florida.
Oh, okay.
No, so I'd moved around a lot in my 20s. I went from San Francisco, graduated 2010, went down, lived in LA for up until 2016, basically. Went to Florida for 2016, came back to California, lived with my parents for a year in 2017. Moved to San Diego, then moved to LA, then left overseas. Like, I moved around.
I thought for some reason, I thought you were in San Francisco in the early 2010s after you.
No, once I left San Francisco, like I was so done with San Francisco when I left. Like I I graduated in 2010. I didn't go back to the city to visit somebody until like 2013.
Right.
Like I hated that fucking city.
Mm-hmm.
I still do. In a way. Like I remember watching Godzilla like so many years. Like what year was that? 2014 when Godzilla came out.
I don't know.
Did you ever see Godzilla?
I don't follow movies.
So anyways, there's a scene in Godzilla where Godzilla shows up in San Francisco and the whole city just gets fucking demolished to ashes. And I must have replayed that fucking scene like 10 times. I still watch it to this day if I need like a pick me up. I'm like, feeling a little energy, like let's watch San Francisco get destroyed. And I watch it for 10 minutes, just watching, every tower and skyscraper get blown to fucking bits. And like,
well, we don't need Godzilla to do it. We just need a Marxist mental disorder to infiltrate city council and cause them to present solutions to problems that only exacerbate the problems. And you've probably noticed this. Like when I look at liberal politicians, they create non-falsifiable hypotheses, and so it's like the reason X problem exists is because of Y, and a compromise solution occurs where we'll do this to fight Y. We're not going to give you all of what you want, but we'll give you half of what you want. And guess what? Y still exists. Maybe the problem's even larger. Well, the excuse is always, well, it's because you didn't let us do what we wanted to do in the first place. Now give us more. And then the dumb people who negotiate with them say, okay, well, we'll give you a little bit more. And then they go a little bit closer to their communist utopia, which actually exacerbates the problem. And we're back in the same loop where the measures that are proposed to remediate the problem are guaranteed to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, well, you have that combination of non-falsifiable hypothesis of here's a problem that I can't prove is actually a problem, but you need to trust me. And also here, I want you to give me a Mott Bailey solution where give me everything I'm asking for. Oh, I'll give you a little bit. Okay, we'll take that a little bit now, but we want more later. Why does it function that way? Is this like a feature of the human brain? Is this like a fault of being human? Perhaps. I spent years trying to analyze it, and I realized past a certain point, once somebody's ideologically captured by sort of illogic, like negative logic, you can't really turn them back. Like you can't. It's an emotional-based system of reasoning. It's highly predicated on sort of this. It's almost entirely predicated on this idea of like oppressee oppressor, which appeals to anybody that has ever been felt downtrodden any time.
Yeah.
And once you get that mental programming in place, it just self-replicates. Mm-hmm. It's designed to bypass logical circuits in the brain. Like, don't think about this too much. Just fucking feel it and do it. Yeah.
It's a very. I would say communism is a very viral ideology. It's super viral. It spreads very quickly, and the anecdote that the capitalists have proposed to fight it doesn't work. Oh, we're going to use logic and reason and math. Like, okay, great. That didn't work at a low dose. You think it's going to work at a high dose? No, it doesn't either. Like, you got to fight illogic with illogic, in my view, or otherwise you're going to lose.
Yeah, no, it's a hard problem, honestly, to like, how do you fight this? Because its endpoint is a very decayed state of function existence. I mean, it's for anyone that has, if you've been to Eastern Europe or you know anybody that grew up under communism in Eastern Europe that lived through it for multiple decades, it sucked.
Yeah,
it's quite a unanimous opinion of like, hey, what was it like growing from East Germany? Really shitty. Nobody says it's good. But Western society at this point, at least in the United States, certainly, I can't speak for everywhere in Europe, but in the West, or in the United States, we're committed to this very historical view of history.
Right.
Nothing, everything that existed before 2008, before Obama got elected, was stupid and racist and bad, and everything that happens after that is good, hopefully, and not oppressive. That's one of the lessons of history. The lesson of history is that everybody doesn't learn anything from history. That's just how it goes. Human beings will keep making the same mistakes for forever.
Well, they'll say this time is different because I'll look at somebody like my dad where he will tell you, oh, we know that communism doesn't work. We know that market-based systems are the only way to go. It's like, okay, you voted 25 times in your adult life and 100% of the time you voted for Democrats. Oh, but they're not communist because look, if they were communist, then you have state ownership of corporations. You wouldn't have private property, this and that. It's like, okay, but it's kind of it rhymes with it a little bit too much for my liking, where he will claim that because it's not exactly the same, it's not that.
Yeah, like most people are not going to, my parents are the same way, but like most people don't think about second, third order effects of like how they're voting now.
Sure.
Yeah, I've seen California decline in function for my entire life. Been very disappointing to me. Yeah, my parents will still keep voting Democrat. It's like, do you guys ever make the connection between your political decisions and the functionality of your state government and local government? Anything? No. Yeah, people don't
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's like people can't connect their body to what they're eating.
Yeah, voting is a very weird, disembodied process of we want to believe that it's democracy. Like we all have a say, and we all have a say in how things function, right? It's our right to vote. It's like, okay, you say that, but then you don't make. There's no connection made. There's no inference made between do you think who you vote for affects the day-to-day functionality of the world you live in right now and into the future? Are these things connected at all? So you voted for person, you got this person in the office. There they are. They're running things. Things get worse. Do you see this cause and effect between your decision, them being in power? Anything? No.
Well, I think they're also, a lot of the people on the left are also of a permanent victim mindset. And so even if they're in a position of power in a lot of major institutions, they're not in complete power, right? Conservatives do exist.
Well, it's never enough.
Right.
This is sort of the Sal Alinsky, even if you look at the Cuban Revolution, I've never been to Cuba. Maybe this is wrong, but I believe one of the phrases there of, even the government to this day is the revolution is still going. Mm-hmm. The war is still being fought. There's some phrase in Spanish where it expresses this better.
It lets you continue to put your dissidents in jail if the war is always going on.
Yeah, but it's this idea that even when you've had the revolution, even when you took over, we won, but we haven't truly won because there's still external enemies, right?
So the human condition hasn't been defeated.
No. So when that's your mentality, I mean, you see this even now with woke, crack rhetoric for young women who are Zoomers. It's until we're all okay, we're not okay. Until everybody's okay, no one's okay. It's what the fuck does that even mean?
Right.
Yeah,
and guess what? So we're never going to be okay because everybody's not going to be okay ever.
So until 8 billion people have all this bullshit, some Zoomer crap, until 8 billion people have resolved their childhood trauma, overcome their generational curses, gotten a therapist, found radical self-love and acceptance, no one's okay. I'm but why do we say these things? Because you know what? Human beings always default to the mean. And the more globalized you are, the less smart your society is.
Yes.
So these little crack, you call them chick crack, whatever you call them, platitudinal crap phrases that feel good to say, that don't make any logical sense. Of course they're going to be fucking regurgitated. How could they not be?
So this is actually a hypothesis that I have for how humans evolved over the last 30,000 years. I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast before.
Go for it.
But the human brain was larger 30,000 years ago than it was today, or 7,000 years ago, and I think it was still larger than it is today. Humans were actually physically larger before the agrarian revolution, or the agrarian revolution as we understand it, than they were up until now. 100 years ago, humans were smaller than they were 10,000 years ago. And you think about that, well, how is that possible? If the proliferation of grain made life so abundant and so predictable, how is it possible that people are both smaller and have lower cranial capacity? And my belief is that the agrarian revolution was the first version of the smartphone, where what it did was it enabled lower value humans to subsist without dying. And so what that did was it brought the nature culls the herd, every generation. But if you have farmland that you can subsist on, the hurdle that each man and woman needs to clear is lower. So you're going to end up sacrificing product quality for scale. And that's why there are so many more people than there were 10,000, 30,000 years ago, but each individual is both smaller with a smaller brain.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, the advantage, I think, to the agrarian revolution, which you could argue, why did that create civilization, is when you get people into larger groups beyond a Dunbar number of, let's say, 150, so you have the sustained population in place for long periods of time, you could argue that it's sort of this, I won't say it's insectile, but it could sort of, you get this collective intelligence effect of okay, we have, let's say, 1,000 people in this one area for a prolonged period of time. What can we work on together
Yeah.
So if you pool intelligence that way, over a long enough period of time, you might solve some, fairly hard problems. I have this. I don't know if I'd call it a theory, because I don't know if you can really prove this, but I've seen this float around online, sort of like the theory of like the, history is driven by like the super geniuses.
Yeah.
Where I think when you look at things, structures today, let's say like the pyramids, I'll give it a generic, the pyramids in Egypt, or any kind of sort of ancient monolithic structure where it's made from stone. It's basically it's masonry. It would have required pretty much slave labor. So who gives a shit, right? Like labor's labor. But it's like, how did somebody built this? How was this built? I'm like, it wasn't a guy. No, stupid people do not build these things. But it probably was, I think, is that you have, in any population, if you get enough of a population together, you're going to have some end of bell curve, long tail outliers. So you had some guy 10,000 years ago, let's say, who's like 180 IQ, just fucking brilliant, has this mental power to intuitively just figure shit out in the environment. Probably he's looking at rocks and stones, seeing literal fucking geometric shapes.
Like, you could smell where the quartz is.
Realizing wait, I could fucking make these things from these fucking stones. And at that point in time, this guy would be so far ahead of his peer group, and assuming he has the ability to verbally express himself, he's going to be seen as like a fucking prophet, god, shaman, something. Like he's going to be defaulted to as a leader. If he can demonstrate competency. So then it becomes easy of like, hey, like we should just all listen to Bucky right here, who's clearly fucking smart. And obviously we're not dealing with modern feminism, none of this bullshit. Like, in this time, at this era in history, might is right. The weak should fear the strong. This guy is clearly the smartest one out of all of us. He's the one that tells us what to do. He knows the fucking migration patterns of all the animals. He knows how to fucking plant all the crops so they grow the most.
He knows how to feed us.
Yeah, do what he says. It's like, so this guy's like, all right, guys, we're going to cut these fucking rocks and we're going to go conquer that tribe and make them slaves. And they're going to build this shit for us. It's going to make life great.
Right. Well, and one thing I don't disagree with you, but one thing that's interesting about the agrarian revolution is the human population didn't actually grow that much during the agrarian revolution. So what ended up happening, it's sort of like the wealth effect of the 1980s, where the average person didn't actually get that much richer, but the rich people got a lot richer. That's what happened, I think, during the agrarian revolution. Is if you look at the male to female reproduction ratios pre-agrarian revolution versus during the agrarian revolution, what essentially happened is the formation of mass harems, where through human history up until the agrarian revolution, one man would procreate for every 2 or 3 women. So that means 60% of men would never find a mate to have kids with, but the 40% who did would have 2 or 3 kids, or have kids with 2 or 3 women. When we figured out how to get land to yield predictable food, what that meant was you could store wealth, which you could use to pay an army, which you could use to secure more land, which you could use to produce more wealth and pay more soldiers to secure more land. But then the power within society concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people, to where the procreation ratios between male and females spiked to like 13-1, where the average, like 90% of men did not have their own kids, but the ones who did averaged having kids with like 13 different women.
I've seen this data. I think it was like a 12-1 ratio.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm nitpicking, but like, I think what's interesting about that is like when you look at like, this is totally kind of a topic, like incel behavior supposedly today. It's like, oh my God, like there's this percentage of men, about 1/4, like they're not having sex, like they're not reproducing, like they're not fucking, right? And like, is that a feature or a bug? It's like, so this is the incel problem. Calling it a problem is predicated on this idea that apparently, like no one really thinks about this correctly. Like, so we're assuming that 100% of men or 90% of men are having sex with like 100% of women. Is that true? Is that actually true? Like we look at like anthropological, archaeological, whatever you call, bioevolutionary data. Is that true? No. When you look at the data, most men never fucking reproduced. They just died.
Right. And a functional society was able to restrain them and keep them in prison.
And usually violently. But like, I mean, so the reduction, you could like, why do we reproduce more today than say 10,000 years ago, or even 2,000 or 5,000 or 500? It's been the restraints on violence. The world today is far less violent day to day. When we do have violence, it's much more explosive in nature,
right,
and exponential. You get World War II, something like that, or Vietnam War. The ability to bomb like thousands of people at once. But for most of human history, on a day-to-day basis, if you were a man, like you might get killed. if you, presumably said the wrong thing, pissed off the wrong people, like you got to behave yourself.
Well, it's also childbirth.
And you had enemies. Oh, yeah, that too.
A lot of women died in childbirth.
So you have like 1 in 3 deaths in childbirth. You got dying in probably like a tribal battle or, whatever. Someone insulted your familial lineage.
Or you fell off the ledge of a pyramid or something like that.
You cut your finger. It got in, this is where like I'm critical of like a lot of like sort of the online sphere now when they're like very anti-science,
right?
Or like anti-Western medicine. I'm like, do you know how many people fucking died from infection prior to like fucking 1900, 1920s or pasteurization?
Right.
You could cut your finger in fucking 1890. Oh shit! I slice my hand open. Fuck! It gets infected. You're dead from sepsis in a week.
Right. And do you think so? My view of this is because I've had infections, taken antibiotics for. I'm sure you have too. Most people by the time they're 30 have.
Yeah.
We don't really worry about it. We're like, okay, if there's a red thing on my skin and it's getting bigger, let me call a doctor and do what the doctor tells me to do. I don't worry about that. It doesn't cause me a tremendous amount of stress. But if I didn't know what to do in a situation like that, I would be much more inclined to go to church every Sunday. And I think that because we have medical solutions for what had previously been the unpredictable nature of life that would cause people a tremendous amount of anxiety and throttle the growth of their ego, we have convinced ourselves that science has replaced God, and we are now God.
Yeah, that's a theory. I mean, this is sort of like I don't want to say that's not like a 12-year-old hypothesis, but like, why have people become less religious over time? So like as you could say, post-enlightenment, as science has provided immense explanatory power for much of the phenomena that we would previously attribute to the supernatural, to the theological. We've become less and less believers of sort of higher powers or deities or God as a concept. Yeah, that's more or less true. I mean, that's why God today, I think, certainly in the United States, probably most of the world, like what we call like Christian fundamentalism, this hyper literal interpretation of the Bible. Like, is this literally what happened? Maybe, maybe not. Like, is this the way it was always practiced 2,000 years ago? Like, were the early Christians like hyper fundamental literalists? Yeah, I don't know. Because if you read those, if you read the gospel today and you take like sort of a non-fundamentalist view, you're reading like Matthew or John, whatever. It's like, okay, you're reading about this guy. His name's Jesus. He's contradicting the teachings of what was the Jews at that time of how to have a personal relationship with God. He's describing how we're no longer going to be judgmental of people. You can be saved. Your relationship with your Lord is one-to-one. All people are redeemable. This is kind of like the mimetic theory where, prior to Christianity, we have the power going to the oppressee. Now the power is going to the victim. So like we're all victims of the world. We're all victims of suffering. Now we don't have to suffer anymore. So that's what was being taught then. He was killed. Okay, like was a Christian in 500 AD literally believing that's literally what happened? Every single part of the Bible was hyperliteral. Like, the Bible took kind of codify. I don't think these people were living in a hyperliteral world as we interpret today. I think the literal interpretation, the fundamentalist interpretation, probably became more dominant over the centuries, decades, as materialism became the dominant vehicle for Western thought, the predominant modality of Western thought. And now we interpret the Bible in this literal sense, and then we're very dismissive of it.
Well, I mean, let me counter that.
Maybe, I don't know.
In 500 AD, it's not like people could turn the TV on or turn on YouTube and have 100 different choices of stories to be read to them, right? They had one, and it was the Bible. And so
part of the Bible. Yeah, that's the other weird thing. Like, I wonder how our brains function today. Are we smarter than our ancestors, or are we just exposed to more information? Like,
no, I think we're dumber. I think we are dumber, but we're exposed to more information. So it's like, are you smarter with a smartphone, or are you dumber? It's like, well, you're smarter because you can do more things. But if you take that smartphone away, you are dumber because you can't do all the things that, like, I can't fix a car, right? I don't know how to hunt or fish, like things that every man would know 100 years ago. I don't know how to do that stuff. I don't know how to fix anything. I know how to pay people to fix it, but I don't know how to do it myself.
Yeah. I suppose we conflate information acquisition with feeling like we know things. Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, I'm not like a Ted Kaczynski kind of character. Like, I want to go back to this primal anarchist world. Technology is technology. Like, things are always going to get more complex. So, there's always going to be smart people trying to just create complex things because that's the only thing that gives them a sense of purpose.
Sure.
Which I guess maybe in 500 AD you'd build a really nice church if you're really smart then.
Right.
That was the most complex thing you could do. Or you build aqueducts. You do something that was almost infrastructural.
Right.
Now I guess you fucking build apps in Silicon Valley that
I think shit about. In 500 AD the church was Netflix, right? The church was it was like Netflix in the sense that it created all the content. So, and then people paid for the content to be creation in the form of weekly donations. And those donations were used to create both more content and build out more infrastructure, which was visually awe-inspiring. So new entrants into the church ecosystem would say, well, of course it's true. Like, how else would we see that these like awesome physical structures exist around me? I mean, how could I explain that without believing in the stories that they're telling me? Of course the stories are real, because why would these structures be there if they weren't?
That's a great comparison. Yeah, maybe.
I also, when I went to Italy in 2015, I thought that seeing all these churches, I was like, oh, this was the McDonald's of the Renaissance, where they could literally from, Rome or, wherever the epicenter of the church was at the time, they could literally model out like, okay, each franchise location is expected to generate X amount of, whatever, lira, denarius, whatever currency they were using. And it's your job to bring it in, and we can give you a bonus for whatever you bring in. But the majority of the money is going to have to funnel up to the top. And like, this is how they built their wealth. And they also built land. They amassed land. They had the papal states. They go to war with neighboring territories with their own army. And then they also functioned to bolster the legitimacy of the leaders around Europe, because the Pope would say, well, yes, of course you could listen to King Henry because he is, he's blessed by us. And if you had no leg to stand on to justify to your people why you're legit, you realize they go to church every Sunday. You realize that there's one channel of communication. It's like in order for the kings to maintain power, they needed to pay the SEO that was the Vatican. And then the Vatican would then scratch their back by saying, follow this guy. They would collect taxes. They would kick back more taxes to the Vatican. And then the scheme would just continue.
Yeah, that's you could use that as a comparative metaphor. I mean, I guess I suppose in a way the Catholic Church was kind of the forerunner to like globalism incorporated today.
Probably.
For a period of history, for you could say at least by about 500 years, maybe even longer, 700, by way of papal decree. And, eventually, as you said, the church eventually, the papal states took over. Like the Pope was sort of this authoritarian body that what he said was the way. He needed that blessing. Like they managed to dominate the world. They acquired immense amount of power, if nothing else. Yeah, and then eventually that started to fade away as breakaway states formed. Obviously, King Henry told the Pope to go fuck himself. Church of England, Anglican Church.
Right.
Then it declined over time. And then I guess to say the mission as they lost their economic success, it became perhaps more centered around the saving of souls, or maybe it always was. Maybe it was both happening at the same time. Yeah, I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone make that comparison that way.
Because I don't read books. I just went and visited these places. I'm like, this is definitely what happened. I'm not going to test my hypothesis. I know human nature. This is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you don't build those kinds of structures without having a shitload of fucking money, and you're getting it through tithing. So you're getting it through somehow through patronage.
Right. You're literally monopolizing all the top artists, because if you're one of the Ninja Turtle artists, right? You're Da Vinci, you're Michelangelo. You're like, well, I need to make money. Who's got all the money? The kings in the church. So what are the kings in the church going to pay me? They're going to pay me to replicate the stories that they're telling people. And so you're going to produce awesome works of art that replicate the Last Supper, that replicate whatever, date King David. And it just makes people buy into the system even more, and the investments pay for themselves.
I mean, what art does... With those guys with the Ninja Turtle artists have produced, I can't even fucking saying that loud. With the Ninja Turtle artists have produced great art, if it didn't have that religious cosmology to use.
Probably.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they were very talented. I'm sure they could have repurposed it for anything else, right? They could have replicated war battles. They could replicate anything, but they were getting paid by the church was it was Viacom, Comcast, like the Democratic Party. It was like all of these things it did. And since then the powers of the church have been eroded over the last couple hundred centuries. But yeah, that's I think the place that it fit within European society, Western society. Not to say that was bad. I think it performed a very important function, but I think that's what it did.
Got it. I don't know if I fully agree, but I'll go with the idea that
pick it apart whenever. Not now, later. You're smart enough to pressure test this hypothesis. I want to know if it's wrong. I want to know where it's wrong. But that's just how I look at it right now.
I don't know. How do you prove that wrong? That's just a hell of a comparison to make. Like, is that a reasonable comparison to compare the Catholic Church or Orthodox Church to, what we encapsulate today as sort of like being the dominant, like, global homo narrative order of media, social media companies?
Nobody could read. And the printing press didn't exist. So literally the only people who could read were employees of the church. And the only stories that were that were generally created were church stories, because the church had to pay for those creations. I mean, there's obviously plays and some literature art outside of that, but the predominant media production would have been around biblical stories.
It literally would have been Bibles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this guy. Okay, so you have to kind of agree with sort of the European Dark Age sort of hypothesis that there was a lack of literacy, which there were in some cases, and life got harder and culture went backwards a bit. Okay. Yeah, I mean, at the same time that's happening, you also have like the Islamic Golden Age happening, like right around 1000 AD. Yeah, it's like what would the equivalent be of like a priest today? Yeah, compared to that time, I guess a curator.
No, the priest today would be like somebody on the trust and safety team of Twitter or something like that.
Well, they all got fired by our heretical friend Trump. So
right. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's what I think is going on. But okay, to continue on the franchise talk, you're very famously. You tell everybody what your favorite restaurant is.
Okay, let me preface this. So McDonald's is not my favorite restaurant, but here's the holistic.
What do your behaviors reflect?
Well, I do that because it upsets people.
Oh, okay.
So on any given day, like, one of my mottos is you gotta be, it's a TBT. No, I'm sorry, ABT. Always be traumatizing. Okay, always be triggering. So when you look at the overall body of research on obesity, BMI, body weight, long-term health outcomes in regards to like long-lived populations, there's a few patterns that emerge. One is that people who maintain normal body weight throughout their life live longer. Like, this is very obvious shit, right? This is where like bro science is like, everyone should know that. It's like, yeah, but you still have to test stuff out. So we look at the actual hard clinical science and we know that, okay, if you maintain normal body weight throughout your life, you are probably going to maximize your lifespan. So don't be fat. That's one. Also, if we look at the hard science, it says if you don't overeat or if you slightly undereat, you're likely to also maximize your lifespan and you're not going to die from obesity-related complications. Number two, okay, we look at the dietary data. What's the best diet? The best diet is the one in which you consume a moderate level of calories that are more or less your maintenance level intake. Don't overeat and you maintain your body weight. It's just the same shit over and over again. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, science has spent a lot of time trying to study obesity, obviously, and why are people overweight?
That's science with a TM or science?
Yeah, science with a TM or just science in general, like the medical community. Like, okay, so depending upon your perspective, if you look at the overall data, you can make some inferences that less satiating diets are more likely to lead to overconsumption, overeating.
Sure,
you can say that. You can say that protein is definitely more satiating, more thermogenic, more nutritious. You can say that. Sure. Mm-hmm. You can also look at people who eat somewhat shitty food, or maybe not the most optimal food according to its nutrient profile, but they still maintain normal body weight and they're going to be healthy. There is no data necessarily, no research that supports that eating ultra super duper fucking crazy mega healthy is going to make you live whatever 120% longer and make you 5 times healthier. The things that matter quite literally are just it's calorie intake, meeting your macronutrient needs, exercise, and everything else is just details. So, that context in mind, myself, McDonald's, I exercise a lot. I love to train. I'll train 2, 3, 4 hours a day sometimes.
Really?
Shitload of exercise, shitload of a high volume of training. So I know that my sheer fucking caloric expenditure is, it's way over 3,000, 4,000 calories on certain days. Like it's fucking high. So by default, that's just going to kind of burn through whatever bad food supposedly I eat.
Sure.
2, I know that based upon, anecdotal research of people who have lost weight eating fucking ho-hos and potatoes, that is there anything in McDonald's that's going to kill me, drop me dead, today if I consume it? No. Is there anything in McDonald's that's going to kill me next year? No. Is there actually anything that shows McDonald's is going to be bad long-term period? Not really, no. Now you could call bullshit. Someone could, well, what about the fucking chemicals and there's microplastics and maybe 20 years from now you're going to get colon cancer, you stupid fuck. Like maybe you're right, but we don't have any actual good, solid clinical science, reliable science that shows any of that. The people that get colon cancer are usually people that are fat and overeat. The people that get diabetes, overeat. The people that get fucking high blood pressure, heart disease, overeat. I don't overeat. My body weight stays in the same fucking range all the time. I have total control over it. I know how to auto-regulate very effectively. I have high protein intake. I'm not nutrient deficient. If I go look at my blood work right now, my blood pressure is perfect. My resting heart rate 55 to 60. Like there's nothing metabolically you could point to on paper with any test I get that's like, oh, look it. There's the fucking Diet Coke fucking you up. There's nothing. There's fucking nothing. So what the fuck are you going to say to me?
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm not going to tell you not to do it.
Yeah.
I'll say why I don't personally do it. And
why?
Well, it's because my business, because I use myself to sell my products more than you use yourself to sell your products. I benefit from being leaner, year round. And so I have noticed, do I drink Diet Coke? Yeah, I'll probably have 2 a year or something like that. I have noticed that when I include artificial sweeteners in my diet, that I get sugar. I don't normally have sugar cravings. The only time I have sugar cravings is if I eat too few carbs for several days in a row, probably burn through all my glycogen. My body just needs to get carbs somehow. I'm not giving it enough grains. So it's like sugar, sugar, sugar. But when that doesn't exist, the only time I'm going to get sugar cravings is if I've had artificial sweeteners consistently for a few days. And so it does, in my personal experience, dysregulate my cravings, which I use to tell me what to eat.
Yeah, I mean, if it's fucking with you, they don't consume it. These things don't fuck with me.
Right.
They don't. I've heard that before from people. It's like, okay, if I drink diet drinks, I feel like it messes with my gut biome. Maybe it does, then don't eat it.
Yeah.
But the research on things like aspartame, again, people can bitch and fucking whine all they want. Food safety, additive ingredients go through extremely fucking rigorous testing. Simply because of the threat of class action lawsuits. If there was a soda you bought that was causing, let's say, birth defects 2 years later in pregnant women, they would get sued into the ground. That company would cease to exist. Food companies would open themselves up to immense fucking legal liability, which would be unsurvivable.
So why are the frogs turning gay?
I'd say the frogs are turning gay from a combination of more so environmental runoff from this food production. This is kind of one of the hard problems, right? We need to grow enough food to feed 8 billion people.
Sure.
That requires a fuckload of pesticide usage, tons and tons and tons of pesticide usage. We also have the waste runoff of 8 billion people, which how much garbage you throw away on a weekly basis. I know I throw away a lot of garbage. So is it the food? Is it the aspartame Diet Coke turning the frogs gay? I don't think so. I think what's probably turning the frogs gay is a century at this point. Yeah, about 100 years of pesticide runoff from food production taking over the entire world. I mean, when I say taking over, I'm speaking in
Western.
Yeah, I'm being extreme here. Obviously, we're not maximizing arable land that much. But yeah, I mean, if you dump all that into the ocean, since all of it gets run off, through, basically through climate, it's probably going to affect animals significantly. We also have plastic. Plastic is the other big one now, where it's like microplastic. Like, okay, we've created this polymer substance that literally does not break down ever. What do we do with this? Right. And now it all gets flushed down to the ocean, and now you got fucking fish feeding on little itty bitty pieces of plastic polymer. It's like, does that affect anything? Oh yeah, it probably does. What's the answer to that problem? I don't know. Like it's a lot of people at this point to account for. The population threshold literally reached 8 billion. I think like the past week. That's a fuckload of people.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest issue is a lot of the social issues that we're having right now. I think are downstream from endocrine issues, which I think are downstream from the polymers as well as birth control metabolites in the water supply. So I actually think that the process of industrialization is actually is simultaneously causing the social demise of our society.
Yeah, maybe Kaczynski was right. I mean, when you just have this many people, I mean, this is where a lot of the social issues even today of like, why is communism more popular? Like, look at how many fucking people we have. You got the population from 1900 to today, like it went fucking exponential.
Like it exploded.
Yeah, it's insane population growth. I think Africa. I think like it was like 1950. Africa was like less than 1 billion. Now it's like double, triple that, quadruple that. So you have this insane population growth. Whatever the American founding fathers, mental model was of having this society of like philosopher kings and yeoman farmers who were very independent minded, like the population in 1776 compared to today is probably like a couple thousand X itself. Like when you get a bigger population, you have this big bell curve distribution. Half the population is going to be fucking stupid. Stupid people are going to believe in dumb shit, and they're going to want free shit.
Well, right. And so this is actually a downstream effect of improvements in the medical community, because for the entirety of human existence, nature provided a curative. A curative is probably the wrong word. It makes me sound like a eugenicist or something like that, or a mass murderer. But it provided a natural impediment for the weak to survive. And so once you remove that impediment, then the proportion of the population that would have otherwise been dead 200 years ago rises from 0% to perhaps as high as like 70% today. And oh, by the way, they all are encouraged to participate in our society. So what is the aggregate of their decision? It's going to skew more towards communism.
So I partially agree. So here's the thing about the like only the strong survive kind of hypothesis. I don't know if that's true. So we have to kind of characterize what do we call strong here. Let's say like it's like the year 1700. 1 in 4 babies die in childbirth. Okay, was the baby weak, or was like the woman was weak? It's like,
well, it doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's either or.
Yeah. So I mean, is it strong or weak, or is it more so? I want to say it's luck, but is it just sort of genetic, just stamina, fitness, just luck of the draw? Literally, of like, okay, if you're living in a situation where you're susceptible to every kind of disease, every kind of medical, complication, is a certain percentage of your population is going to be dead by default, whether they're strong or weak, let's say.
Well, right,
but they're strong.
But their immune systems, just think about strength, not in physical strength, but as immune system strength. Every human is going to be exposed to dozens of pathogens from the age of 0 to 5 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Historically, those pathogens have killed approximately 30% or whatever of kids 0 to 5 years old. Of the 30% who were exposed to those pathogens, how many of them were unlucky enough to be exposed to the bad pathogens versus they just got exposed to common pathogens and died? We don't know. Let's just say it's 50-50. So that means 1/6 of the population that was being constantly taken from the human population was those with immune systems that were likely in the lower half, lower quartile. So it's constantly forcing the immune systems of those who can procreate to be in the upper 80% of society and not allowing those with weak immune systems to continue to replicate.
Okay, so you're having this immunological kind of turnover. So presumably the people with the strongest immune systems, if we go with that, you'd probably want to be, as they want to be, like I presume to be people living probably in a city, just by way of exposure, you're going to have more you're going to have a broader spectrum immune system, like the more you're exposed to. And if you're living in rural conditions, or you're in a fucking Native American in 1550, like you're pretty fucked at that point, because there's a whole set of pathogenic vectors you've never been exposed to. And then the Europeans showed up and you're all fucking dead.
Well, you're only fucked when you're exposed to them. You're not.
Yeah, you're only fucked when you're exposed.
Yeah. Years, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go with that. So people had stronger, by some definition, immune systems. Then we get to medical science, and now you can have a weak immune system or a not so robust immune system, but we can still keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you also realize that almost everything in medicine has comorbidities. So if you have a weak immune system, what's the chances that you're physically weaker? Well, greater than zero, right? There's going to be some degree of positive correlation between having a physically weak body and having a weaker immune system. There's going to be some degree of positive correlation between having lower cognitive function and having a weaker immune system. Is it going to be 1? No, but it's going to be greater than 0. And so when you remove the selective pressure that would otherwise, through history, remove the weakest people from the population, like they are included in decision making. And you also have to realize that a lot of our institutions were created as pyramids to benefit a small number of, proprietors of those institutions with a lot of worker bees. But as the institutions gain more prominence, you still only have a small number of proprietors, but the number of worker bees expands proportionately to the leadership class. So if you look at like a corporation in 1960, maybe the average corporation had 500 employees to one CEO. Well, now that corporations have gotten bigger, you still have one CEO. Corporations still only have one CEO, but now they have 5,000 employees instead of 500. And so, you look at the labor capital split between the executives and the worker bees, and it's going to become much more skewed towards the executives, which is going to give more of the worker bees, incentives to grab their sickles and pitchforks and rise up and try to overturn capitalism or, white supremacy or whatever the modern iteration of that is.
You can only have so many elites.
Right.
No, well, this is kind of one of the arguments Peter Turchin makes. He's a guy that he does like cliodynamics, which is sort of like a Isaac Asimov, historiological perspective. So this idea that so here's one of his theories is that like you have this thing called like elite overproduction.
Yeah.
So as populations get bigger in society, more people want to be in elite positions of power,
mm-hmm.
and there's a finite number of positions. There's just it has to be. There's not everyone can be in charge, of course. So what happens is populations get bigger, they start having to manufacture elites somehow. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, we can't have everybody running the government, but you could be running this educational institution.
Right.
Or you could be the head of the church. Or you could be the head of this today, like activism, like political activism.
NGOs.
Yeah. So we have to keep sort of creating these entities where it's like, all right, we know people want power. We can't accommodate everybody wanting power, but maybe we can distribute them out enough where people feel like they're getting some segment of influence and they're not disrupting us at the absolute top. But then the problem with elite overproduction is that the elites start realizing that they don't have much power because there's more of them, and they start fighting with themselves.
Right.
And at the same time, you also have the general, what do you call it, the plebeian population, where they're just kind of along for the ride. Mm-hmm. You're just here, and it's just going to go how it goes, since you have no real say in how anything functions.
Yeah. So, well, as we're nearing to the end of this, we haven't even gotten to talk about fitness, which I'm sure some people...
want to talk about fitness? I didn't know. Like I'm still kind of digesting your Netflix. Church, which feels heretical, but it's entertaining to think about.
Well, and it definitely fits your ABT, your ABT criteria, so you could chew on that a little bit longer. But want to give you a chance to share what you've been very good at and very successful at with the listening audience. So maybe before we get into what programs can help people out, what would you say like the top 2 mistakes that beginners make when they're trying to lose fat, the top 2 mistakes that people in the intermediate phase make, and the top 2 mistakes that people in the advanced stage make? Because I think in fitness journeys, a lot of times, in my view, people will misapply lessons from a stage that they're not in, which actually throttles their ascent to try to get to the next level.
Okay, so I'll start with beginners. Obviously, that's kind of my specialty. So beginner mistakes. Oh, God damn, there's so many.
Water.
Where do you even start with this? All right, so common mistakes that beginners make with fitness. So I'll say like mindset is a big impediment from the very beginning. So like, in mindset, what does that mindset mean? I mean like all the stuff in regards to like, could I get fit at the age of 33? Or like, is this really going to work? Or like these kinds of questions where like people are begging for permission. Like there is research on 80-year-old geriatric women, literally 80-year-old women, strength training once a week on machines that still build muscle. Like it doesn't matter how old you are, anyone can get fit at any age. So just to dispel that segment of excuses. And then from there, it's just like it's basic educational kind of stuff, foundational things. Like, okay, you have a body, you have a skeleton, you have a musculoskeletal system, you have gravity. This is how I always explain stuff to people. It's like you have gravity. If I drop my phone, gravity goes straight down. Okay, so you have this omnipresent force, this omniscient force that's pulling you down to the earth at all times, 24/7. The thing that resists that is muscle. Muscle being on your skeleton, enabling you to move. And the more muscle you have, the stronger you are, the better you can navigate your environment, the more resistant you're going to be to the effects of gravity, to wear and tear. So like building muscle is good. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, that makes sense. Like this is very like first principle kind of, turning against premises. Okay. When we lift weights, what are we doing? We're basically adding gravity to our body. So if I weigh 200 pounds and I put a 100-pound weight on my back, now I weigh 300 pounds. And that added weight puts more mechanical resistance tension on our muscles. And as an adaptive response, they're going to get bigger. They'll grow. This is what hypertrophy is. Let's write that out in words. Hypertrophy. Hypertrophy. Your muscles will grow.
PH.
Yeah, whatever. Your muscles will grow as an adaptive effect to resistance. Okay. Why is that good? Because the human body on a day-to-day basis, when you move around, you expend energy, right? That's what calories are. It's a measure of energy expenditure. Well, when you have more muscle, your body metabolizes food better. You metabolize sugar better. You dispose of glucose better. You have a stronger immune system. Doing anything's easier. Is all this making sense? Yes. Okay. So this is where so the mistakes a lot of people make is just believing, I guess to summarize it, it's just believing dumb shit. Or it's negative knowledge, as I call it. Like, it's not that you don't know anything. What you actually think about how exercise works is like, it's, literally like negative information. It's things that you believe they're incorrect or false are making you stupider. So what I would usually do with beginning clients would be like, okay, like tell me what you think about exercise. Like, what do you know about working out? Like, do you know anything? Just tell me. It's like, okay, I think this, okay, let me tell you why most all that shit's wrong. So if we can deconstruct your bad beliefs, your incorrect beliefs, we can replace them with factual ones. And now this process will make more sense to you. Because training, for beginners, it's just a very scientific, simple process of you go to the gym or you're at home, whatever. Let's say you go to the gym, you do a series of movements that work your major muscle groups to temporary fatigue. You leave the gym, you go home and rest. You consume protein because that's what your body's made out of. It's made out of amino acids. You consume protein, sufficient calories. You grow, you get stronger, and you keep doing that for 1 to 2 years. And then once you're past that beginner stage where like you've added presumably, at least 15, 20, 35, maybe 40, 50 pounds of lean body mass, now you're intermediate, strength gains have slowed down. You've learned how to lift. You've learned what the different muscle groups are. You've learned basic anatomy. And then at the intermediate stage, the mistakes a lot of people make is not recognizing that because progress is no longer linear, you need to have defined systems in place to create further incremental progress. So this is where like learning how percentages work becomes something useful. Understanding that progressive overload is not literally adding weight to the bar or adding weight with the dumbbells every single week. You're going to be using the same weights for relatively long periods of time. Understanding how strength works in regards to that your strength is not going to be peaked every single day of the month, day, week, year, whatever. You're going to have to assess what your 1 rep max is, train in that 70 to 85% range for periods of time, gradually increase your maximal strength, test it again after, let's say, 9 to 12 weeks of training. Oh, it's gone up. Okay, let's reset my max. Let's go back to the training process. So this is where it actually gets systematic. It's mathematical. And if you can't think in systems, then you're just going to be one of those people that maybe you make some newbie gains and then you don't know what the fuck to do.
Right.
Because how it's organized. So, so that's like the intermediate kind of mistakes. And then also at the intermediate stage, you should know by that point what exercises work for you. And everybody's going to have similar exercises. It's not like, the movements that work for you are not crazy different from my movements, but there's going to be slight changes.
Sure.
There's going to be, there's going to be differentiation. Maybe if you have longer legs versus someone that has shorter legs. Maybe if you're a guy like, I have very long limbs. So there's certain movements that I favor, like say with dumbbells, that, you know, if I was 5'9", maybe I'd like to use the barbell more. You know, what's better? What's better is what works best for you and keeps you injury free and progressing long term. You know, so you develop the exercise repertoire. And then, you know, along with that, you also develop like a system for nutrition. So, you know, presumably in the beginning, you can just tell beginners like eat more protein, you know, eat this, don't eat that, eat more of this, and it works. And okay, but if you want to be leaner, or if you want to keep adding muscle mass, again, you're going to have a system in place. You're going to have some foundational knowledge of macronutrients, carbs, protein, fat, like what's in what. Like you should understand at that point, like what foods have protein. Yeah,
a lot of people don't realize this.
Like this is a super common question I get. Like I laugh. It's like, what foods have protein in them?
Animals.
Like oh shit, you know. But like that's 80% of most people. You know,
I didn't right.
We take this for granted. It's like
right.
You don't know what has protein in it. Like meat. It's like, but to ask people like, can you define what protein is for me? No. Do you know what an amino acid is? No. Like do you have you ever actually thought about like what your body's made out of?
Yeah. No.
Okay, like this is so. When I was training clients in person, like the running joke with like my clientele was always like they were signing up for classes, since I would literally have the whiteboard by me the whole training session. So I'd be having them work out, and in between sets, I'd be like, all right, let's do some more like science education, so all this shit makes sense to you. Yeah, and what I found with that, I mean, that's not a replicable approach per se, you know, because it's one-to-one. But when you effectively educate people on the process, their buy-in massively increases, their confidence in the process, because they actually know that it's working. Yeah, that's a common problem that most people struggle with. Like, what works with exercise? Like, what's your theory on diet? I'm like, I don't have a personal theory on diet. You need to eat food to not fucking die. Like that's fact. You can't argue against it. That's a testable, falsifiable theory. Don't eat and see what happens. Oh, you're dead. Okay, so you just need to eat, right? Yeah, but this is stuff where like fitness for most of the population still has like sort of this magical esoteric element to it, where you think it's, I don't know, I think like it's people making shit up and it's pet theories. Yeah, and it's not. You know, so anyway, so the intermediate stage, you should have systems in place. You should be a systems-based thinker. You should be combinatorial in how you put together your exercise selection repertoire, your preferred training model, whether you train with a bro split, a total body split, upper-lower split, you know, whether it's, you know, a powerlifting style split, you know, squat bench deadlift, like you should have a perspective on that. You should have a philosophy. And then once you get to the advanced stage, it's two things. One is that you realize that you just have to keep executing the same basics that have been working. It's like the process gets very boring.
Yeah.
Because like you're not going to discover a new exercise or innovate really on anything at that point. It's like, okay, if I just keep doing fucking hammer curls for the next 20 years, my arms will keep getting incrementally larger.
It's going to be larger.
Yeah, it's going to be really slow, but I know it will happen. So I just have to be satisfied with the boredom of it. So there's that aspect of like, you have to hammer the basics again. And the other aspect is maybe that's where like the cool supplements or like the really minuscule micro tweaks in training practice and coaching cues and execution in the tools you're using, maybe that's where actually like it makes like 1% difference, that it feels meaningful to you, so you might as well do it. You know, this is where like I think, and you know this having, you know, played baseball high level, at the elite level of sport, elite level athletes, they always have weird shit they all like to do. Everybody has their fucking quirks and nuances, idiosyncrasies, and they swear to God that this fucking makes a difference in their performance. And it makes no rational sense, but they have some argument in their head like, no, if I do this thing, if I wear these shoes, if I turn my fucking socks inside out, and it makes my feet just feel a little more tactile, like when I'm fucking running, like I can fucking turn better, like I have more agility. It's like, okay, fine, fuck it, dude. Maybe it does. You know? Yeah. So do that. So that's the advanced level. You're doing the same basic shit, and then you're trying to find those tiny tweaks in your day-to-day performance. And advanced athletes, I think especially, you really have to auto-regulate the process much more day to day. So like a beginner, it's just, here's a program.
Just do it.
Go do it.
Yeah.
Intermediate, it's like, okay, here's a program, give me some feedback, and I'll help you along the process. And advanced athlete, someone that's legitimately advanced, that's being changed on the fly in real time.
Sure.
Because at that point, you should know your body, and you should know your body, mind, self well enough that on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, you have to make those adjustments. Maybe it's a fucking 99% day. You can push the performance.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a fucking 70% day. It's like shit. Like I'm not I don't have it today.
You slept 5 hours instead of 8. Are you going to do the same training plan that you planned on doing yesterday going into today? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
And that's not smart if you decide to.
No, and that's why advanced athletes, they'll typically have like multivariate solutions for any kind of training problem. Like, okay, I'm not feeling it today, so I'm going to do this kind of workout or this kind of mental preparation, or I'm going to change the exercise sequencing or the warm-up. Or even on the field, it's like, okay, like I'm not feeling it today, so I'm going to do this kind of mental rehearsal. I have a different set of rituals for when I feel this way versus that way. But these are all things that only come with like long-term, like multi-decade, at least like 10-year plus experience.
Sure.
For a beginner, like none of that stuff would make sense. There's no context for any of it.
Sure.
Or even for an intermediate guy, it's like you just need to keep following the plan and just customizing it as you need to as you go along.
Sure.
But for the advanced individuals, that's where there's coaches that really specialize in that. And the coaches that do truly work with advanced athletes, they'll tell you that it's not really about the program so much of like, what are you using for a program for NFL players? It's like, I'm not throwing them like this crazy advanced program. That's really bullshit. Like
physio ball squats.
No, like it's just some sport, like this idea of like elite sports performance training is really bullshit. It's like I'm doing the same things I do with them that I do with probably beginner intermediate. But how they approach it, their mentality, that's where the work is.
Sure.
Because at that point, your mental state, the mental state of an elite athlete is the difference between victorious performance versus completely fucking up and shitting the bed and going into a negativity spiral.
Sure.
It's that fine of a line.
Sure. So for beginners, what's the best program of yours they should buy? And for the general population, whether beginners, intermediate, or advanced, if there's one AJAC program that everybody needs, beginners and everybody, which two should they look at?
The one I'm most favorable to is push-pull legs.
Okay.
And so this is the reason why. I get asked a lot about total body programs. Total body programs 100% work. Mm-hmm. Indisputably, again, for a beginner, if you go to the gym, you do a proper, correct assortment of exercises that comprise the overall majority of the body's muscles to failure, everything's going to grow. The issue I have found with total body programs is that the mental organization required to keep track of them is difficult. It's challenging. So if I tell you, like, hey, Alex, you literally have never worked out before ever. I'm going to teach you about 10 different exercises, and every time you come to the gym, I want you to do these 10 exercises. That's just a lot of exercise.
Sure.
It's just a lot of exercises. Yeah, and are you going to keep track of all of them in a logbook? Probably not. Versus if I tell you, hey, Alex, you're going to train your push muscles today. What are our push muscles? It's my chest and my shoulders and my triceps. Okay, you're going to do one exercise each. That's 3 things to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I favor the push-pull leg scheme, not because it is the mostest optimalist perfectest, but because it's just the easiest to remember.
Okay.
It's a mental organizational model of dividing the body into different sections. You group exercises based upon its respective gross motor function. And I have found that 80% of people find that just fucking easy to remember. It's really hard to fuck up.
Sure.
And it also aligns roughly with like a squat bench deadlift model of like, okay, you're going to work your legs, you're going to work your upper body, the front of it, and you're going to work the back of your body. Again, it's easy to remember.
Sure.
Exercise repertoires, if you ever actually have to teach people in-person exercise, it completely destroys any belief you have in people being like naturally athletic.
Oh,
when you're an athlete, you take for granted that everybody gets stuff within like the training session. Like, hey guys, you're going to do this new thing. Let's try it out. Okay, you're struggling a little bit. Everyone at the end kind of figures it out. When you train non-athletic populations, which is most people, shit as basic as a fucking lunge, that takes like 10, 20 minutes.
Or you get in line at the Google cafeteria and you watch people's lack of proprioception, lack of spatial awareness for realizing bro, do you realize that somebody's literally 18 inches away from you and you just hit them with your elbow?
Most people who are not athletes are movement retarded. And I would say that to be supremacist. Well, I
just
do.
Clinically diagnostic.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you're athletic, you take for granted what being athletic means. And when I say athletic, I don't mean a Division I pro athlete. I mean athletic in the general sense that you pick up motor patterns quickly.
Sure.
It's its own kind of intelligence, actually. It kills that intelligence. If someone doesn't have that, then okay, going back to what's the best program, I want to give you as few exercises as necessary to get you results and the easiest mental model to follow and something that is replicable every time you go in the gym.
Yeah.
So I like that PPL kind of split.
Okay.
That's why I recommend that. That's why that's, at this point, like, my top selling, like top 5 programs.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that follows it's like, oh, this is easy to execute. It makes sense, right? How it's laid out. I don't necessarily need to keep track of everything, really diligently when I go to the gym, and I get results, and cool. I love how this works. And progressive overload is probably the biggest thing. What's the thing I fucking forgot at this point? Teaching beginners how progressive overload works. So if you understand how progressive overload works, or overload works, specific adaptation to your post demands, if you can get that concept from the beginning, then making gains, getting results in fitness, it will make sense. Absolutely. You'll have a mental model of that process. Absolutely. What's always amazing to me is people that go to the gym for years and they actually don't understand how to get stronger. Like they've been using the same weights for 20 years.
Right.
And it's like, how did you never thought about it? It's like, it was never explained to them. It's like, okay, here's how you actually build muscle and make gains. All this bro shit that we take for granted. It's like, most people don't know that. I get asked about progressive overload all the time. Like, hey man, so could you explain how progressive overload actually works? So what's your theory of progressive overload? I'm like, this isn't like my theory I made up. This is how your body adapts to stress. If you want to adapt to more intense levels of stress, you have to raise the intensity of the stressor.
Yeah.
Respective to lifting weights, that means you have to make the weights heavier, or you have to do more repetitions, a greater volume of effort with the same level of resistance. That's what that is. It's like, once that clicks for people, it's like, oh shit. But if it doesn't, until you understand that, like, God knows what the fuck you're doing. I don't know.
Right. So I got to cut this off because we got to do a round 2 of this. I think we could have gone for like 2 or 3 more hours.
Yeah,
but
probably.
Where's the best place to find you, get your newsletter, follow you on Twitter, YouTube? You have a good Instagram. What's the number 1 place for the AJAC resources?
Okay, so the number 1 place for everything to actually get in touch with me, one-to-one, I can help you out. Sign up for the newsletter. So it's on Cortes.site. I have the link also on Twitter, AJA_Cortes. It's also on Instagram. Newsletter is actually, that's the email list where I actually reply to people. I always answer all those messages. Obviously, then you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on IG. And I post, IG is all like video exercise tutorials. Twitter is Twitter. So it's a combination of fitness stuff and then just general, off the cuff observations and, whatever things you feel like saying.
That's awesome, Alexander. Everybody give him a follow, buy his stuff. I think he's genius level, and we'll definitely have to do
Thanks,
round 2. Well, I'll let you fester on my religious ideas. Tell me where I'm wrong, and the next time we get to do this. But thank you very much, Alexander. This was awesome, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening. If you love that video and you want to check out another one just as cool, click right here. If you want to learn how I stay shredded 24/7, 365 without counting calories, eating sissy salads, only eating delicious food, and not living in the gym, I have a free webinar that you got to check out. Clicking here.